I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting today, and pay my respects to the elders both past and present. I'm Mitchell Burge, the Head of Revenue and Growth here at triSearch. Joining me today is Ashish Patil, Product Lead of AML CTF. Before we begin with today's topic, we'll go through some basic housekeeping. So for today's session, it is a live session, so if you have any questions about the content that we are showing you, please pop your questions into the Q&A chat. We'll take some time at the end of the session to answer as many questions as we can get to. If you'd like to revisit anything that we're showing you or share today's webinar with your colleagues, there will be a recording available and we'll circulate that after this. Today's webinar is focused on one very specific area of Tranche 2 readiness, and that is onboarding non-individual clients. So from 1 July, this process changes significantly. For many firms today, onboarding a company, trust, or partnership is still handled as a variation of standard client intake. You collect some entity information, verify an instructing party, perhaps run an ASIC or PPSR search, and then proceed. Moving forward though, under AML CTF, that is no longer enough. So you are now required to establish the entity, understand who owns or controls it, identify the relevant ultimate beneficial owner, and then apply AML due diligence to those individuals, and then retain a full auditable trail of that decision making. So for today's session, it'll be more of a practical one for us. So focusing on how the non-individual onboarding workflow can be managed within the triSearch Compliance Center. So we'll spend the first part of today unpacking exactly what changes from 1 July and what firms need to capture. We'll then walk through a live demonstration of how companies, trusts, and partnerships can be onboarded step by step inside the platform. And then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for that Q&A. As a reminder, please drop any questions into the Q&A box as we are going through the session today. We'll pick up as many as we can at the end. Cool, let's get started. So, for non-individual clients, AML CTF introduces an entirely new layer of onboarding responsibility that many firms just aren't doing today. For an individual client, the onboarding process is mostly straightforward. You identify the person, you verify their identity, you complete AML screening where required, and you retain that evidence. But once the client is a company, trust, or partnership, the legislation expects firms to go much deeper. You are no longer simply verifying the person giving you instructions, you are verifying the entity behind that person and the individuals who ultimately own or control that entity. That means from 1st of July, firms must complete 5 distinct onboarding steps for non-individual clients. First, they must establish the legal entity itself. So you need to confirm what the client is. Is it a company, is it a trust, a partnership, or any other structure? And does that entity legally exist? Second, we need to understand the ownership or control structure. So you need visibility over who sits behind that entity. You need to include directors, shareholders, trustees, beneficiaries, appointers, partnerships, or any other controlling parties depending on that structure. The third piece is identifying those ultimate beneficial owners. So under AML CTF, firms must identify the natural persons who ultimately own or control the client. In broad terms, this generally means individuals with 25% or more ownership interests, or those who exercise effective control over the entity, even where ownership is less direct. Fourth, we then have to apply the AML due diligence to those relevant individuals. This means those beneficial owners now become subject to the AML screening process, including politically exposed persons, sanctions, adverse media, and any enhanced due diligence where risk requires it. And the fifth and final step is to retain that clear audit trail. So not just the searches, but the onboarding rationale, the ownership mapping, and then the checks that were performed. This is significantly different than what many firms are doing today. So you'll hear 2 key terms frequently used in this space. The first one being KYC. So that's know your client. And the second piece is KYB, very similar, slightly confusing, and that's know your business. And the easiest way to differentiate the two is to think that KYC focuses on the individual in front of you, whereas KYB focuses on the entity behind that individual. So if an employee of a company instructs your firm on a transaction, verifying that employee alone does not satisfy those AML obligations. You also need to establish who owns the company, who controls the company, and whether there are individuals behind the structure who now require AML due diligence. So that same principle then extends to trusts, partnerships, where control can often be less obvious and spread across multiple parties. So KYB is not simply additional search. It is a broader onboarding workflow that connects entity validation, ownership mapping, and AML screening together. That is the exact operational gap that firms now need to find a solve for. So the area generating the most questions from firms right now is ultimate beneficial ownership. So because this is where non-individual onboarding stops being a simple client intake process and becomes a true AML exercise. Historically, many firms have only captured the immediate contact person or the instructing representative. From 1 July, that's no longer sufficient. So you must look through the structure and identify the natural persons who ultimately own or control the entity. For a company, that may be shareholders. For a trust, that could include trustees, appointers, or beneficiaries, depending on those levels of control. For a partnership, it may include controlling partners or underlying owners. And importantly, once those UBOs are identified, they are the individuals you need to conduct that AML due diligence on. So, this creates two very practical challenges for the firm. The first one is, how do you consistently capture these ownership structures across every file and every team? The second piece is, how do you avoid manually piecing together ASIC searches, spreadsheets, notes, and separate AML reports just to determine who needs checking? Because the manual approach quickly becomes unsustainable, especially for larger firms onboarding these structures almost every day. And that's exactly where the Compliance Center workflow has been built to assist. So rather than treating entity verification, beneficial ownership identification, and AML screening as separate manual tasks, the platform brings those steps into one guided onboarding journey. So the objective is simple: to give firms one repeatable process that captures the entity details, maps the relevant ownership and control parties, identifies the ultimate beneficial owners requiring AML review, applies the necessary AML checks, and then stores all that evidence in one auditable compliance record. So instead of you and your team taking time to interpret every structure manually, the platform guides them through the onboarding logic in a consistent way. What we are going to show you now is exactly how that works for companies, trusts, and partnerships. I'll now hand over to Ashish for that live demonstration. All yours.
Hello everyone. We'll just go through a quick demonstration of how we can uncover a company and perform due diligence on the company. So I will be sharing my screen very shortly, and then we go from there. So I think for your due diligence on company or individuals, we've now made this AML onboarding option available for all of you. So you can just search through the triSearch website, or if you're integrated client through TriConvey, you can just press the AML VOI button or next to the client's name and contact card. So I think we're going to start with a new order, and today we'll focus solely on the organization, and we'll see how we can go through each individual checks and uncover that company. So I'm selecting the company here, and I'm just using some data that we gonna go through today. So we'll just press this and we'll get started. For this, I will just quickly gonna need an actual real ASIC, so I think we'll just find an ASIC ABN number to search on, and we'll go back one more time. Great. Okay, so let's try that again. Okay, there we go. Apologies for that. Okay, so let's start fresh. Now we're gonna use this company as an example, and let's call it This is an actual ABN number I'm using just for the demonstration purpose, so we'll go through the entire journey. So I think there's a couple of key things before we get started. You may or may not know who the UBOs or the shareholders are for the company. So I think in this instance, let's just assume you don't know that information. So I think one of the first few things you would start with this company is you initiate the KYB form. You can initiate the PEP search. Along with that, you need to initiate the ASIC extract. So what ASIC extract does is it gives you an information about the shareholders, the UBOs, and you can then use that information to perform the checks on the UBOs. So let's just begin with the ASIC search. So just gonna need my number. Cool. And we'll do the ASIC search first. So you can see I've initiated those searches, and we'll give it a second. You can see the ASIC has returned as well as the PEP search. So I think at this stage, you're just looking at the extract, and then you're determining who you want to do the VOIs on. So this is a listed company in Australia, so obviously this has got a lot more information, but I think the key things we are looking for is directors, which are these two. So I think once you've found the directors of the company, all you need to do is add them to the workflow, like I've done this one as an example, and then there's two key obligations on you to do on those directors and shareholders. One, you need to verify their identity, and two, you need to do a quick PEP check on them. So let's do that at this stage, and it will be completed in an instance in the system. So you can see the PEP search is done, and the VOI has been sent for that person. In addition to that, you would also notice that the PEP search for the company has returned multiple results. And at this stage, what they've done is they've matched the company name with a global list of PEP sanctions and adverse media. So what you might be doing here is reviewing that information and making sure that is indeed your client. And once you do so, you can just confirm that it is a match or it is not a match. Sometimes when you have a common name that you enter in the system, it may come up with multiple results. And that's why we've got the PEP preview screen here, which will allow you to specify whether that's your client or not. So let's just say this is our client at this stage. I'm just updating it to is a match, which means this is a true match, and that is indeed my client. So at this stage, you've completed the PEP search, you completed the ASIC search. Now I will just quickly complete the KYB forms as well for this client. And then we'll navigate through the AML summary page, whereby I will talk through a few additional checks that you might need to do on your client. So you can see the KYB form has completed, the PEP is completed, and ASIC is completed. We've also got the VOI and PEP search done on the client. So I think that is essentially, I guess, your obligations in terms of the searches for the company. Now we'll look through quickly some of the additional things that you will need to do on the client. We built this for two purposes. One is this will give you all the key information about the client and also the searches you performed on the client. So AML summary outlines all that information. So as you can see here, we've got the basic information collected through the KYC form, or KYB form, I should say in this case. You can edit that information. You can update any details that your client may have completed before you finalize the onboarding of this client. Alternately, also, you can look at all the checks you've performed within the system, which are outlined below. So there's a couple of key areas we've outlined here. One is the client due diligence, which essentially your key obligations and searches that you will need to perform, which are KYB form, PEP check, and ASIC search. You've done all of that. That's amazing. And also, we will list all the key stakeholders and UBOs that are linked to this particular company. So in this instance, I have selected just one, but if there are multiple, you can add them, or you can get that extracted from your ASIC extract as well. So you can have as many UBOs as needed. So I think the key threshold for AML searches is that anyone who has more than 25% shareholding is the one you need to perform the checks on, and those are the ones that you would want to add on this screen. Anything less than 25%, those obligations are not needed. So you might find the company might have multiple directors, but not all of them are shareholders. So I think that's quite key because you don't have to do the searches on any additional ones that are less than 25% shareholding. So I think at this stage, you've got all the information to finalize the onboarding of the client. Now there's just a couple of things you need to do. One is perform the risk assessment. And we've got this risk assessment functionality whereby we have digitized the OSTRAC kits on risk assessment, and you simply need to go here and navigate through this screen and select yes or no. So these are in line with the starter kits, and essentially it outlines all the key risk areas or services and associated risk. So for this example, I will select yes. For this one, let's assume the property is more than 1.5 million, and I will select no to every other one. But again, as I said, this is pretty much, I guess, conditional. It will depend on the transaction, and it will depend on whether these are applicable to your clients or not. Once you do that and update the risk, you will see that we automatically calculate the risk for the overall client. In this instance, there was just one medium risk factor, so it automatically updated to the low risk. In addition to that, you also need to complete the final onboarding checklist, which is, again, all it says is you've done all your due diligence on this client, and you're just confirming those checks are correctly done. So we'll just select those and then share, and then that is completion of all the checks you need to perform. Now, before I press onboard, occasionally you might find one of the clients may be high risk, one of the clients may be a more complicated one, which has multi-tier entities. The shareholders are, in fact, another company or is a trust. In that instance, I think we have got this escalation function, which will allow you to escalate this particular client to your compliance officer. And the purpose of that is your compliance officer should be equipped with all the information, and they should be the one guiding you in this instant what to do next. Now, most cases, even if the client is high risk, I think it's all okay because you would have performed your checks on the client, and I think that's what you need to do for those high-risk clients. But if you wanted to escalate, you can just use this functionality, and it will send this matter to your compliance officer. We won't do that today, but I just wanted to highlight that there's escalation functionality, and again, that's in line with the OSTRAC starter kits also. So we'll not submit that. We'll just delete this one. So I think at this stage, highlighting that you've performed all the checks on the client and you're satisfied with your checks and results, and then you can just onboard your client at this stage. So let's press onboard, and that is the onboarding completed. Once you've updated that, what we would have is onboarded status for the client, and obviously the risk I've talked about. But in addition to that, you will now have option to generate the AML report. So let's have a look at this. So the AML report we have built for the purposes of record keeping and for the purposes of pushing it back to your LEAP matter, so to your triSearch matter. And it kind of serves as an evidence that you've performed all your checks on this client, and this will help you with any audits down the line with OSTRAC. Now, let me just quickly highlight what we've got here. So let's just zoom a little bit. So what you have got here is the key information about this client, which is coming out of the KYB form you've sent, which outlines all the details. So in this instance, for example, it also tells me that this is an ASIC listed company. So I think the thing with listed companies is that they're relatively low risk, known companies that have lots of obligations. So you can be sure that they've got processes and everything in place. So they're relatively less risky as compared to the unlisted company or private companies. So I think that information is included in the AML report. Along with that, you will also notice we have information about the checks you've done, for example, risk assessment completed and what date it was completed, PEPS check, organizational check, etc. We didn't complete the VOI for the shareholder, but that's okay. This is just an example, but ideally you would have the VOI completed and PEPS check completed as well. And so I think this again serves as the proof of your obligations being met, and then you can save this for your record down the line if there's any audits. We automatically actually push this report to your tri-convey matter if you're integrated client, but otherwise you can generate and download this report if you're using the web version. So I think that is all I had to demonstrate today. So again, I'll maybe just also highlight that the transaction we have just done also is linked to your compliance center. You can see that there's a lot of escalated matters, which is again our testing, but again, it will show up on this transactional tab, whereby your compliance officer will have visibility across the transaction, and then if one of them was escalated, as this one is, it will be highlighted. So that's another feature we have with the organization. I will quickly also talk through maybe just a couple of things before we go to Q&A session. So when you start the order, we also have supports for trust and government body. Again, these categories of clients are defined by Austrac starter kits, and we've just aligned our solution to those categories. I know that trust has many different variations, many different types, but I think for the purposes of AML, they're all, I guess, combined into just one category, which is the trust. Again, I think if I go to the trust, the obligations there are is to identify the trustees and again do the same level of due diligence as we've done on the shareholders. Government body, again similar. I think you just need to know what that company or entity is, and then perform similar checks. So across the board, I think just to summarize, you would be identifying and uncovering the organization, whether you use ASIC or UBO search, whether that's an international company. That would be the first step, and then your goal is to identify the ultimate beneficiary owners or key stakeholders in that company, and then you will then perform the VOI and PEPS check. And finally, just to close off, before onboarding the client, you need to do the risk assessment and final onboarding checks. And that would fulfill all your obligations. And as I mentioned, we would have the final onboarding report as well made available to you. So I think that's a good segue. We should jump into the Q&A session. So we will just go through your questions and answer any queries that you may have.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that, Ashish. I'll just go ahead and jump through, I guess, 3 key takeaways from the presentation side. So first, onboarding non-individual clients is fundamentally different from onboarding individuals. It requires a deeper understanding of ownership and control, not just identity. The second piece is AML CTF obligations are centered around the ultimate beneficial owners, not every individual connected to an entity. So getting this right is critical to both compliance and efficiency. And the third piece, and the biggest challenge, is for firms to be able to deal with non-individuals. It is not understanding the requirements, but applying them consistently and at scale. Cool. So we'll jump into the fun stuff now, the Q&A side of things. And the way that this will run is I'll go through all the questions we've had sent through, and there's quite a few of them. And then I'll hand over to Ashish. But I will take the first one because it's a relatively easy one and make myself look good. So the first one there is, can you explain the acronyms PEP and UBO? So acronyms are crazy in the world of AML CTF, or anti-money laundering counter-terrorism funding. And PEP is politically exposed person. And then UBO is ultimate beneficial ownership. But again, all these sort of terms like the KYC and KYB that we touched on earlier, they get thrown around all the time in the world of AML CTF.
Great.
Nice.
I may just touch on a little bit on the PEP, adverse media and sanctions. The reason that's important is sometimes, just to elaborate further on the PEP, PEP is a politically exposed person. That would be any politician, their immediate family and friends and things like that. And reason you need to do those checks is that you need to identify if they are related. And if they are a PEP, I think the key obligation is to do a verification of source of funds and wealth. Why? Because I think you need to make sure, because there's a lot of stuff that goes with politically exposed person, bribery, etc. And so to make sure you're doing your due diligence, you need to verify where they're funding this money for this transaction. So that's why we've got the verification of funds as a feature as well within our system. Sanctions list is quite dangerous as well. Sanctions is an international list of known, I wouldn't say offenders, but they're known criminal, or they have an ongoing case going against them, whether that's financial or otherwise. And it's also a key list that you should be looking out for. If your client is on a sanctions list, that's a red flag as well. Adverse media could be a mix of, they could be for good reason or bad reason, but still, again, if your client is on either of these three lists, it's always good to escalate with your compliance officer and make sure you're doing the right due diligence on them.
Makes sense. One of our eagle-eyed attendees noted that the PEP match was confirmed on the demonstration. Should this be updated automatically to a medium risk?
Yes and no. I mean, as I said, the PEP search gives you a yes or no answer, and I think once you've found your client on the PEP list, you still have other factors to evaluate. As I was showing, the risk assessment questionnaire is not just PEP. PEP is one area or one risk, but there's other factors as well. So I think we should evaluate the list to its entirety. And yes, if a client is shown up on the PEP, you should tick that as a yes. And then it's a combination of all the risk factor that constitutes the overall risk of the client. But yeah, I agree, like if they're a PEP, it should be medium immediately.
Makes sense. Nice. Now, down a different vein, if a client is buying or selling via different agents or conveyancers, do they need to undergo this process each and every time?
That is a great question. I think with the conveyancers, as we know, they like to do their own due diligence, which has always been the case for VOIs as well. So I think it's more so on the agent side that there's a provision called the reliance, which is the agent relying on the conveyancer of their knowing to get the AML report. So the way it works is the conveyancer or a lawyer would do the due diligence, and then if it's the same client that is dealing with the real estate agent, they can just share the AML report with the agent. But again, that's completely optional for the lawyers and conveyancers. If they wanted to share, they can. But I think it's really beneficial for the consumer because they don't have to go through that same process, and they save quite a lot of money and time in avoiding that process with the agent again. So I think, from my view, the reliance is a key to avoiding those repeat checks for especially for your client.
Makes sense. And I think conveniently enough, we have an upcoming webinar on compliance, reliance, where we deep dive into that a little bit more. So if anybody's interested, we'll circulate that to all the attendees today. Ooh. So we have, how can we obtain or view or edit the KYB and KYC onboarding forms sent to our clients?
Great question again. So I think our KYB form, just for context, KYC, KYB form are directly taken from the starter kits, and those are the prescribed question set that you must ask of your client. And so the first release we have is those questions are locked down, but we're looking at opening those up and allowing our clients to add additional questions. So that functionality will be coming out soon. We will be able to allow clients to edit those questions. But I think the key for that is to still continue to ask the questions that are outlined in the starter kits, which are the base questions. But yeah, I think to answer the question, that functionality is coming very soon.
Nice. Oh, this is a good one. If you are lucky enough to be elected your firm's compliance officer, what does the escalation process look like?
Great question. I think, well, again, we're not experts in this, and we've learned through the guidance of Austrac, and we've been lucky enough to work with Grant Thornton, who's the advisor of the starter kit for Austrac as well. But again, don't take this as a legal advice. I think the process of escalation is to make sure the AML compliance officer is across that particular client that has been escalated, and they can provide guidance to the file handlers or to the conveyancer who's working on that matter. And the way it works is once the escalation is made, I think your job as a compliance officer is to advise what additional checks might be required for that client, whether or not you want to proceed with onboarding of that client, or whether you want to say, hey, that's looking very, very suspicious to me. Should we pause the transaction at that point? So I think those would be some of the key outcomes of the escalation that the compliance officer would need to be evaluating and advising the conveyancer on. And depending on the outcome, I think majority of the escalated matter, the AML co might just request the conveyancer to continue, which would be the majority of the cases. But again, if the 1 in 1,000 there would be a super dodgy, suspicious client, then your obligation as an entity or a compliance officer is to then report that to Austrac.
Yeah. Makes sense. The next one we have in here is, how long is onboarding valid for? In the past, my VOIs that I conducted were valid for 2 years unless circumstances changed. Is this still the case?
That's a great question again. And within the industry, we know ARNEC regulations allow you to reuse VOIs for up to 2 years. But with Austrac, their recommendation is slightly different. What they say is you have to perform these checks for every matter that you deal with. And I know that would be inconvenient for most of our clients. But I think if the matter is relatively done in a closed time frame. For example, you're dealing with a client for a sale matter, and then the same client is purchasing another property within a certain time frame. I think you could reuse the VOIs, which we will facilitate in our system. But I think it's always good to do the risk assessment, the final onboarding checks, and PEPS check. That doesn't require, anything from your end client. So I think you can use the VOI component, but you still need to do the other components as required per matter, because matter A might be different to matter B, and therefore the risks might be different as well. And so the assessment might be different. So I think in summary, you could use VOI in a relatively short period of time if that's the same client. But I would advise that the risk assessment and final onboarding be done independent of that. Yeah,
makes sense. Along a similar vein here, we have, if you undertake a VOI in person with a client, are we still able to utilize the PEP and sanction search through triSearch?
That's another great question. Yes, I think we facilitate the in-person workflow within the VOI for web clients. I think you can use that to capture the ID documents, and then the other bits, which is the PEPs, you can perform still through the system on that matter. So I think in-person is okay if the client is elderly. It's not always feasible for them to do it through the phone or through digital means. So we facilitate the in-person VOI, and additional checks, as I mentioned, can be done.
Awesome. Oh, another fun question. When will we see these features in our TriConvey platform?
Well, it is available today. I would highly recommend you go log in, do test transaction, train your staff members. The obligations don't kick in before 1st of July. So I think reason we've made these features available to all clients is that they have enough time to train themselves, train their staff, get their hands on these features, so that it's easier from 1st of July to do these checks. So it should be available, and if not, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to your account manager or someone in triSearch. I'm sure we'll be able to help you set it up.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll touch on that a little bit more at the end, but some more questions keep flowing through. Everyone seems very interested. So if we are required to conduct enhanced due diligence, does triSearch support this?
Absolutely. So I think I would mention a couple of things we have in our system that would be very handy. One is the source of fund and source of wealth is considered the enhanced due diligence. So that's not required on every single matter, but only required if you have suspicions about the client, if the client is a PEP, if the client has a high risk. I think in those circumstances, it's definitely worth using that feature, which basically requests the end client to submit proof of their source, bank statements, etc. And then you can determine based on that whether you're satisfied with the funds that they're sourcing these transactions with. Second thing we have the PEPs monitoring, which is called the ongoing monitoring, which will monitor that client for a certain period of time and alert you automatically through our system if the client goes on that list in future from the time when you initially perform those checks. So I think, again, enhanced due diligence where needed. We've got those couple of features that would help you guide through that additional, I would say, barrier of checks that you might want to do on your client.
Yeah, makes sense. And we've gone through a lot today, so I imagine that's why this question's been asked. So will we be creating or supplying any training guides?
Yes. We have lots of training guides already. So I'm not sure if you've noticed, but we have a new AI agent called Tilly, and all the question articles are now surfaced through that AI agent. So I would highly recommend, and I was doing this personally as well as a part of my testing, just ask a simple question to our AI agent, and there'll be an article that will be shown to you with exact steps of performing that. So I would suggest play around and see if that answers your question in the first instant. We also have a YouTube channel whereby we have actually uploaded, I think, about 10 to 12 videos, which we can provide you the links for. And as I was saying earlier, the staff at triSearch, the help staff and the account managers are always here to help you with any guidance or any questions you may have.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed the training videos that were in there that we worked with from Grant Thornton when I was setting up my compliance center.
Yes.
So that's very helpful there to work through those modules as you set up the basics.
Yes.
This is a good question. Do we still have to register through AusTrack, or are we okay just to do it with triSearch?
Well, I think that's a great question. So just to be very, very clear, every single entity who is going to be covered with Tranche 2 have to register independently with AusTrack. And it's a simple registration process. All they need to know is your details, which is ABN, ACN, who your AML compliance officer is, and I think that's the part of your obligation. So even if you have access to triSearch, I think there's an independent registration that you need to do with Austrac directly. We don't facilitate that, reason being it's very simple, straightforward, but I think that's part of your obligation. Before 1st of July, you have to be registered with them.
Yeah, makes sense. And obviously a very good good resource if you have any more legal related questions to go directly to Austrac with those. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We have covered a lot in a relatively short space of time. So hopefully this has been helpful in giving you a clearer view of what AML CTF onboarding looks like for non-individual clients and how you can approach it in a more structured and scalable way. If you'd like to explore this further or see how this could work specifically in your firm, please feel free to scan the QR code on the screen to book in a demonstration. As a reminder, this functionality is now available, so this is a great time to get in there and start getting familiar and building into your workflow. You have access to the full account management team and the support of triSearch, so if there's anything you wanted to deep dive into, or if you did have any issues with the audio earlier on and you want to revisit, please reach out directly to your account manager or scan that QR code and we can deep dive into that with you directly. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ashish, and thank you everyone for your time today. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.